Welcome to the Frontline podcast, brought to you in association with the Atla Group. Atla Group is a collaboration of businesses with a collective history of over 130 years, bringing financial solutions to its clients in the world of accountancy, audit, advisory, fiduciary and retirement benefit solutions. Visit atla.im today. On the Frontline podcast, we chat to leaders in business and successful entrepreneurs to bring you their in-depth and bite-sized opinions that will add value to you and your mind.
Graeme, thanks for joining us today. I appreciate you giving us a little bit of your time.
Lovely to be here.
Perhaps for our listeners, perhaps just give a little background to maybe start with on yourself, and I suppose the initial thoughts that came to mind that started this journey of Eyesea.
Mostly working in marketing and comms for various players in the industry, from owners through to service providers. But this really led us on the journey to Eyesea. Knowing a lot about, or a little bit about many things is a dangerous path to walk. But it opened up our eyes to the issues that were facing the industry around management of pollution, from emissions right to plastics on board ships. And it occurred to us that there was actually very little known about maritime surface pollution, and that the shipping industry had a unique opportunity to provide observational data. The things that the guys at sea see every day can be recorded and mapped, and that gives us a much wider perspective of what's going on out there. And as I said, we're the only ones that can do this. It's pretty much the shipping industry, recreational sailors, and fingers crossed, the fishermen. And these are industries that have been left out of this discussion, in my view. That it's become an environmental issue where the problem is being discussed around us, not in consultation with us, but we're the only ones who have access to this area. So that's in a nutshell how it all started. I was beginning of 2020. Great timing for an idea. Superb. Just as the pandemic hit, we flew up to Hamburg to discuss this idea with Chartworld, who do digital navigation and ECDIS delivery on board ships. And they loved the idea. It was sort of fitted in with what they do nicely around mapping. And Oliver Schwartz and Stephen Schubberger, they offered to pay for the development of the app, which, as a startup, is quite a big deal. And it kicked off from there. And then we were able to sort of take more than just an idea to shipping companies to explain how we wanted them to be involved, what they could do, how simple it was. And the buy-in was fantastic. There was a real desire within the industry to actually take the lead on an environmental issue rather than wait for compliance. And from the guys at sea through to CEOs, through to ops guys, the message was the same: is that everybody wants to do something. No one sails to cause harm, and that was a really nice thing to see from the industry.
And just to take a step back, pre-technology, should we say, that mapping or logging or keeping track of pollution, was that even done as a concept, or would it be you get to port and might report waste in a certain area? Beyond that, there was no approach, aligned approach to it.
I believe there are compliance requirements for reporting of pollution and oil and spills and the like. But this sort of, there is none of this information out there. There are similar pollution reporting platforms, but they're mainly designed for use on land, which is fine. Ours was specifically targeted towards the shipping industry, and because we had a shipping background, it was much easier to get the guys and the health and safety requirements of using a phone on board. That we're not out there to police the industry. This is about the industry trying to do good and providing a piece to this puzzle that doesn't exist, and that so. It was an interesting development process of making sure all these concerns were sort of integrated into the first development of the app.
I presume that there's some anonymity there if people want to report issues, but also perhaps don't want necessarily to be the one publicly putting a hand up saying there's too much waste here or there's pollution here. It's more of an anonymous.
Yeah, it's really interesting. We've only had that a couple of times. Generally speaking, the guys. I've actually been. This is one of the things that surprised me is that there's actually a fair amount of bullishness out there about wanting to be involved, and not reporting something doesn't stop it from existing. And this is certainly the message we get from the seafarers. They are tired of sailing around other people's rubbish. They can't do anything about it. You can't recover it from a commercial ship, but now you can report it. The app is designed to be anonymous, so that sort of takes out one of those possibilities of problems. And right at the beginning, the anonymity was a difficult word to pronounce. Was a critical part of our development. But as we've got more people involved, I believe this is going to be less of a problem. Because again, as long as we can work out, based on the data we receive, can we take action to do good? There's less and less reason not to report something. Yeah. And certainly the guys out there want to report. The feedback we've had consistently from the guys at sea is just that. I want to help. I want to do something. And this provides a very simple, very way to be involved in an environmental issue that they all care about.
Absolutely. So let's talk about the app. Downloadable. I've certainly got it on iPhone. I assume you can get it on Android. It's geo-tagged, so you spot some rubbish with your settings on your phone. Obviously, pretty much knows where you are anywhere on the planet, and maybe even further afield. And it's a matter of snapping it and logging what you've seen.
Yeah, so the app is designed to be as quick and dirty as possible because we know what it's like on I don't, but other people do know what it's like on a ship. You don't have time to sit on one side of the vessel for half an hour recording everything you see. You have a job to do. There are health and safety requirements around working on a ship. It's designed so that you take a picture. That picture is, as you said, geolocated with a timestamp. The picture is really all we need. And the data is sort of the data collection. What we're doing is collecting data for other people to use. We've just signed an agreement with IBM to provide our pictures to their Plastic Net project, which is a global database of pollution imagery where machine learning will develop to be able to identify what is in photos, be it density or individual item identification. And that's relevant for something we'll discuss soon. But really, from a seafarer's perspective, just take a picture. The picture will be put on a chart or a map, and that allows us to do a whole lot of other things with it, be it from try and help with cleanups through to provide it to researchers, and even we hope the authorities, because again, nobody wants to see this. It's a matter of how we can work with people to coordinate action and recovery eventually, but data is critical.
And you mentioned seafarers there. This isn't limited to people out on a boat. Ultimately, you're on a beach, you're on the shoreline. There's opportunities for anyone listening to this, if you come across that, to log it.
Absolutely. So the by far the biggest data set we're going to get is coastal, or even urban. As you said, the GPS works anywhere. Whilst our network is heavily maritime, we're starting to move into general community use. And we've got some great examples of this in India, Chile, Hong Kong, the US, where we've got community users who are walking along the beaches just recording what they are seeing and picking up the pollution in most cases. Probably our heaviest data set comes from Canada, which would surprise most people because you'd believe that, well, Canada must be pristine and clean, right? But the volume of fishing gear that we're finding on beaches has been concerning and surprising. And what we've found is that this is a issue that is hard to raise with people because they believe it all comes from, well, it's all Philippines' fault or it's all India's fault. But what we're seeing is in every country in the world, be it New Zealand, Canada, the UK, this is an issue on people's beaches. And the more we can report this, the more we can highlight what is going on at a local level as well as a global, as well as the global level.
And I assume with currents and tides, etc., it's some ways, again, it's not about finding where it came from, but ultimately if there's problems on a beach, you ultimately want to try and track it back if it's not that specific location. I guess that's through the development phase, that tracking ultimately where sometimes the issue is elsewhere than where that rubbish is necessarily sat the moment it's snapped.
Yeah, I mean, there's a ton of stuff we can do, and fantasy is free, of course, but actual development costs are not.
Yeah.
But the ability to put in modeling data management systems are in our plans, but these plans require funding and support. Yeah. But this is certainly the path that I see taking. But right now it's data collection, because that data shows vast potential of what we can do with solid information. And it also, the data also opens up the ability for us to go, hey, we know there's a problem in X port or X harbor. We know it warrants. How do we go about getting that support? And this means it's much more targeted than just hoping you find something walking along a beach. It allows us to sort of assess where money is invested in cleanup and protection, and which areas need the most help. And that is really part of how we build up this map.
One of the things that I suppose initially came into my line, I saw what you were doing on LinkedIn. You got an Isle of Man connection, but what really struck me when I kind of chatted with the team was just how, maybe you guys don't feel it, but my observation is how quickly you've kind of got a global presence already with what you're doing. And obviously you mentioned IBM as an example, obviously a worldwide known name that immediately within pretty short space of time that they're buying into the concept. And that must be a good drive, I guess, that you're on the right path.
Yeah, it's terrifying. It's been, IBM is nice, and it shows we're doing something that I guess guys like that pay attention to, which is fantastic. But other examples, like where we've just started funding a beach cleanup in India because the data that came in showed there was a need for it. We're working on a Manila Bay project at the moment around mapping pollution. I guess it has been rapid and has been fantastic to be part of. It never feels fast enough if you're sitting in the middle of it.
Right. Yeah.
But when you reflect on like where we've come from an idea at the beginning of 2020 through to launching the app publicly about 2 months ago, all done on a volunteer basis. So no one's getting paid to do this. It's literally out of the goodness of people's hearts. This is being done. It's sort of shown there is a gap here for the maritime industry that hasn't been filled. And it's so nice to talk to guys about doing good that isn't around MARPOL or compliance or legal requirements. It's something that just makes you feel good, and people want to be part of it. And that's been the nicest. We get inquiries about twice a week, 3 times a week from guys on shore, guys at sea. There are 2 in my inbox now, just wanting to help, and that's been a fantastic thing.
That's something that struck out to us, and hopefully, as so with the Atla Group hat on, we try and develop that relationship and how we can help. I guess for those listening as well, working in any industry, ultimately, if you want to reach out and help, there's a variety of ways to do that. And I suppose the key is to reach out to you guys and offer whatever support they can.
Yeah, and this was the whole part of when we built Eyesea. It was around, I guess, a group that hadn't been ignored, but has sort of been left out of this discussion. We're not environmentalists. I wasn't an environmentalist when I started. Probably am now. It only takes so many photos to change your mind, right? But an accountancy firm or a law firm or any business provider, There's no obvious thing that you can do. What's the obvious way that you can help an environmental group? Well, you can do their accounts, but that doesn't make you feel any better. This is what we found, is that people, regardless of, guys like you bring incredible skills to this problem. And we need these skills to solve what is going on. I don't pretend to be any smarter than the next person. Indeed, the next person's usually smarter than me. This idea has been set up so that everybody can have a role to play, because we need every idea out there. And that's, there was a cleanup. A cleanup was held late last week by Wilhelmsen in Oslo, and they had Wilhelmsen were involved, Salesforce were involved, a law firm, Sands, were involved, MPC container ships were involved, and it sort of brings a much wider business community together to do something. And if that's just mapping, great. If it's providing tech support to the idea, superb. Everybody can do something.
Yeah, lots of different ways to help. Yeah.
Yep.
So just one final quick question before we let listeners know how to reach out to you. The tech itself, and you've kind of touched on there, that the data, like anything in the world, data is the most important thing and probably valuable commodity in the world nowadays. Practically, you talk about beach clean there. How long, medium, and even longer term, do you envisage different ways that data can be ultimately utilized for good?
It's an interesting question.
Examples, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, there's a whole range of. I mean, it's the problem is before we have the data, it's a case of like, how far can your imagination go? Pretty far. But there are things that we know that as we've sort of come along this journey in a very short time, we realize there are holes that need filling. Data is one thing. How do you manage that data? How do you use tech to incorporate the activities of a wide group of stakeholders? And that might be a city and a port and community cleanup groups and John, who likes walking down this one beach. And this is sort of, as I see the concept around this building, it's almost like creating a social network of based on pollution. What a great social network. But this is sort of how I believe the tech can and should evolve, is that it sort of brings in more and more people. It's not necessarily run by Eyesea or owned by Eyesea, that local communities have to take ownership over this. But we need to give them the tools to do that. And currently there are no tools. There's plenty of goodwill out there. And that's been a very nice thing to see, is that there are tons of people wanting to help clean up. The question is, how do we organize this? And how do we make cleanups more effective based on data? How do we provide support based on data? How do we allocate funding based on data? And these are boring, horrible things that most people don't want to talk about, but I think it's critically important to how we move this forward. And sort of from your line of work, I'm sure that's very attractive, because it's sort of it ties into what we do in business every day, and how it sort of opens up the involvement of a whole range of different players.
Yeah, absolutely. So people that want to reach out, your app's available, and what's the best way for folks to reach out?
Yep, the app is on the Android and Play Store. It's version 1, so be kind. You can get hold of me, Graeme at eyesea.org, Graeme at Eyesea, EYESEA.org. Or they can drop you a note, or use the website. Funny websites are terribly useful.
Old school website, yeah.
Old school website. But yeah, I mean, reach out and we can have a chat. It's we're trying to make this as personal as possible. So if you send a note, and it's all volunteer based, you'll get a reply from me. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, there are plenty of ways to be involved. Let us know. We're trying, again, to make this as open as possible, so money isn't a requirement of being involved. We're all grown-ups, though. We know this requires support if it's going to work in the long run, but any involvement is more than welcome. So
yeah, no, and I can speak with an Atla hat on. That's certainly our experience as well. So Appreciate you taking a little bit of time because I know you're very busy. Thanks for joining us today.
Lovely. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for listening, everyone.